All right, I'm gonna do my warning like I usually do. What you're about to hear are nothing like you've heard earlier today. My presentations are a bit different. I'm more about the diving part than the bookwork part. Just like most divers who are true hardcore wreck divers, we lay in wait for things to do, and we research wrecks. We're opportunists. If you're a hardcore wrecker, there's one thing you have in common. You can keep a secret. If you can't keep a secret, you don't last with the wreck diving community very long. We do things on the spur of the moment. We plan them out, sometimes a year in advance, but we don't want anybody else to know what we're doing until we're done. There's many acclaimed jumpers out there. So with that, we'll start off with the Bow Mariner. I'm going to tell you how I put this together. The Bow Mariner sank, and just like everybody else, I'm sitting like at the TV, and it's a 570-foot long vessel, and we're watching the news, and this is what we see come on in a quick little blip. And this is the Coast Guard clip, and it was just, if you're a diver, I gotta dive it. You know, so right away, you saw that little clip there, I'll play it again. We're like, the longer version that they played, you can see the nose has already hit the bottom. You ran to the computer, you Googled the Bow Mariner, you found out how long it was at 570 feet. You're trying to figure out the depth right then. What am I looking at? Can I do it? Is it shallow enough? And I'm drawing little sketches on my coffee table on a piece of paper trying to figure out what I think the depth is. And I thought the depth to be around 300 feet. I said, I can do it. So the next thing you know, where's it at? You got to think. So you listen and everything, and you talk to your friends, and you find out there's somebody working at the boat launch, and they were called out there to go pick up body parts that were floating. So he had the numbers. So I got the numbers. He said, this is it. I went right over the wreck. Obviously, that was a lie. So anyway, I start putting it together. The Coast Guard is doing their investigation. You don't know what happened. So you have to wait. You can't just go out there right away and dive it. It just doesn't work that way. The Coast Guard announced that they were finished with the investigation, but I was already ahead of them planning the trip. Unfortunately, this happened in February. So the Miss Lindsay, which was our go-to vessel for long-range trips, was out of the water being worked on. So it's only certified vessel. It had the proper raft that was required for cold water diving to carry more than six divers, a certified vessel. So I had to go with the other boat that we were using, which was a Florida type boat, open, 48-foot pro dive boat, just like you see in the Caribbean. But we had bought it to run in the summertime. So I had to go to the Coast Guard, since there's a certified vessel and didn't have the proper raft for cold water at that time of year, and had to get an amendment on the COI, which is the Certificate of Inspection, to run as a six-pack, that in the winter I could run as a six-pack. So I had to get that amended on the certification, and then I picked the team, and you're like, how do you pick just 6 divers? Through my years when I've done things, and I spoke about the Marine Electric last year, I always have people come up to me and go, hey, these special trips you do, give me a call, I want to go. It doesn't work like that. The way it works is, if you're diving with me, at some time in your dive career, there's going to be a benefit. You just have to wait for it. You can't just go, I want to go. I got to see you dive. I'm just not going to let anybody on the boat, especially on a trip like this, that the depth is turned out to be 260 feet. The distance we had to run to get to it was 105 miles one way. So I put it together. Another way you looked at it, just the depth alone eliminates 99% of the people you know. So I looked at who I would invite to go. I said, okay, now nobody's going to dive alone, because the last thing you want to have is to have some kind of accident and then recoveries become problems. And these are the things you have to look at. So I looked at who their dive buddy was that person diving with me, and I got 6 people to work out that way. I didn't tell them anything. They didn't know that they made the list. So then I contacted, I know a couple of y'all know Peter Hess. Does anybody want to take a guess at when you go to dive something that just sank like this, where you have 18 people missing, 3 dead, confirmed dead, and only 6 survivors, what you're looking at? The possibility there'll be a body down there. There's people out there who have said things to me, even at the last presentation that I did here, that over in the Marine Electric, when we were looking for the 6 missing crew members, that what I was doing was illegal. Came up after the thing and told me, hey, you know what you're doing is illegal. He couldn't tell me where the law was. Finally, I just had to turn away and walk away from the guy. But that's the kind of people that's out there. So if they ain't on the trip, they want to call you a grave robber. You're going out there, that's a grave. That was not what we wanted to see the wreck. This is an explosion, and it was seen for miles and miles. And I just found out that my mate, one of her local captains, was on the scene, was the first one there. And the stuff he saw, he wouldn't even talk about. But I had to weigh these things. So, of course, I hired Peter Hess. Called him up. He's a lawyer. He's a diver's lawyer. And so what I had him do, I wanted him to call the owners. He wanted to know when I was going. Nobody knew when I was going. I was the only one who knew that. And so I couldn't tell him. I said, I can't tell you, because then you might tell somebody. So I said, all I want to know is I would need you to contact the owners of the vessel. And I have one question. If we see a body down there, what would you like for us to do? Bring it up, or document where it's at and come back and tell you? That opened the door a little bit. When he called me back after the conversation he had with the owners, which were Orfandel. They owned 65 ships at the time. And I'm going to rattle on as I'm going through this. And, you know, we went on the trip, and that's Captain Greg Capt there, and that was his dive buddy over there, Susan. We had to take turns. But anyway, Peter Hess told me that they were very mad that divers were going to go to it because it was still their ship. They were told it was too deep to dive, so they had hired an ROV company to come video the wreck. So they wanted to know when we were going. He said, I can't tell you because the guy won't tell me. And he goes, well, who's the guy? And he goes, I can't tell you. He's a client. He's paid me. So I was very secretive, and still the team that was going didn't know they were going. So when I finally sent it out, and they had the boat ready to go, and this is one of the few expeditions that I did that everything was on me. The other people just got the invite, and that was because they dove with me. If you ever want to be involved with this, you got to go with me and dive with me and let me see you. But I'm getting older now, so things like this don't happen a lot. But to make it what it was, I sent everybody the same email, but they didn't know who else was invited. And they were sworn to secrecy, and I told them if they agreed to go on this trip, that they would only get 24 hours notice when the boat was leaving. They weren't allowed to tell anybody. I wasn't guaranteeing anything, that I was going to dive this wreck, and they were made the list. You accept and you're committed to paying for the spot so the boat can go, whether you go or not, from that point when you commit. You're not allowed to tell anybody. If you told anybody, you were immediately kicked off the trip. You never knew when the date was when we were going, because I was only going to give you 24 hours. These are things you had to... I didn't want it getting out that we were going and have somebody at the dock saying, trying to stop us from going, saying we're going to be grave robbers. We weren't going to take anything. Peter Hess made it clear to me that the ship was still owned by the owners and it was illegal for us to take anything off. And that's what I told the people that went. So we went there, and of course, the people agreed, you know, for something this big to be right away to go. They agreed, and they got their 24 hours notice. The boat had to put an extra 55-gallon fuel tank, a barrel of fuel on the boat. I had the numbers, I thought, but nothing was guaranteed. So I had them I gave them their 24 hours notice, and it worked out to be the weather data that I picked. Happened to be a Saturday, so we left on a Friday night at 3:30 in the morning. And, you know, it's your typical 48-foot dive boat that they owned at the time with the curtains. It was brutal. It was April 17th. I bet you it was 35 degrees when we left. We were trying to drive the boat, and you couldn't see through the curtains at night. The wind was so cold when we undid the curtains to get there that it was the cold was weird, tearing up your eyes. And so we were putting on scuba masks at night and taking turns driving, me and Greg Keffler and Mark Fowler. And so we could get there because you couldn't see, so we had scuba masks on. When the daylight come, you could put the sunglasses on and the wind didn't make your eyes tear up as bad. But we drove 105 miles to get there. The wreck wasn't at the numbers, but there was a lot of oil on the surface. And so I'm looking at the bottom machine, and I could see the pockets of oil that was tumbling across the bottom, working their way to the surface, looked like pieces of shipwreck. But I was pretty savvy enough to know that wasn't a shipwreck. But for the guy who gave me the numbers, he probably just saw a pocket of oil, and it showed up as a piece of shipwreck. So I started doing a grid. I did a 2-mile grid, zigzagging in the area. And just about the time that we were about to go over the wreck, the Big Mac shows up. And he cut right in front of me and dropped the anchor because we found out that he had been there the week before. And this was their second dive. So we weren't the first to the wreck. So, you know, we're dropping the hook and everything, and everybody's getting ready. We had brought 2 tanks apiece of Trimix to do 2 dives, and really gung-ho until you look at the bottom machine temperature. The water was 39 degrees. So you're still gung-ho. The guy who owned the Big Mac, I knew everybody on the boat. He called me up. He said, "Hey, man, we were afraid you were going to hook the bridge. We want to dive the bridge again. Why don't you go ahead and tie up to our stern? And, you know, we're sorry, but we wanted to get the bridge, and you were getting ready to go over it." And I said, "Hey, I'm not mad. You're here first. You know, we'll tie up to your stern." But what was bad, when we tied up to the stern, the wind blew us at the wrong angle. So we had trouble getting to their downline to get there. And it was real, anybody who says they're not nervous to do a 260-foot dive in 39-degree water, there's something wrong with them. They don't need to be diving with me. So everybody was nervous. So we go there, we're super excited. Tom Sawicki was my dive buddy. We both had scooters, and we had mounted cameras on the scooters, and I had the big halcyon lights on there that I had bought so we could see. And I knew Greg Massey was over on the other boat, and Greg yells over and he goes, "Wait, do you see this thing?" You know, and we're like, "Yeah," you know. And so we go do the dive, and as you're going down, you know, you see some of the other people hanging on the line there. They got it. Didn't have scooters, so it was easy for me to catch them. So we were catching them and going down, and it's Suzanne Johnson. That was Greg Kepler's dive buddy, and I said this in one of my other presentations before. This is in 2004, and she passed away later in the year on a dive in the Great Lakes. So, we're going down, the water clarity was just really awesome, and then all of a sudden, boom, it just shows up, and you're like, holy cow, and you're coming into view, and so we found out that at the time, the Big Mac had only dove the bridge area. And Tom and I were going to do the whole wreck since we had the scooters, and we wanted to film the damage and the explosion part and all this. So, we made a one circle. If you notice, I'll go back right here. That photo right there, you see the bow is gone. From that's the starboard. No, that's the port side right there. And then you go around on the other side, and it's still there. Somebody had already removed the bow part off, and that was instrumental in what I'm going to tell you later on. So we made one circle around the house, and then we decided the house in the front of it went straight down because the superstructure and the bridge and all that was on the stern. So we dive right straight down and go down to 210 feet where the deck was. And that's myself, I believe, because Tom didn't really have good lights. And so he's filming, and those are blowed up plates. That's the pipes that run lengthwise of the vessel that were blowed straight up. You see it right there? They're normally right over top the other pipes that you see there. So it just blew them up. I could actually scooter under there. You turn back and you're looking at the bridge right there. You can barely see it. One thing that you will hear everybody that first dove this thing, your dry suit was practically ruined. You spent weeks trying to get the oil off. The vessel had oil all over it. So, that's the deck plate. One of the deck plates completely blowed up, just peeled back like a can of soup. We went all the way up to the bow. That's the forecastle up there. And one of the things that struck me after I watched the videos and everything is that's a self-deploying life raft that didn't deploy. So, we noticed the bow was in perfect shape. Nothing happened there. Everything happened in the tanks. It had been from, I think, Saudi Arabia to New York and offloaded 3 tanks of ethanol. And so it was just vapors in those tanks. The rest of the tanks had stuff in it. So, we found out this stuff later. Everything was secret. The news didn't have anything. The owners weren't talking. The 6 survivors were Filipinos. The crew was run by Greeks. The 6 survivors were Filipino cooks and stuff that worked in the kitchen, and they were inside, and that's who ran up on the bridge and yelled, "We're on fire, we're on fire." You can tell by the accent, it's one of those guys. So nobody knew what happened, and nobody was talking. And the Filipinos, they hired lawyers and refused to talk. So there was some serious speculation. So, we're scootering, and things that we picked out was like, you could see it looked like the hose reel for the fire hose had been pulled out. And we found the hose stretched out, so, each one had been open, so we were under the impression from looking at it then that a fire may have broke out, and the crew was in the midst of because there was nobody in the bridge. Remember I said the Filipino went up and was the one that was, you heard radio the Coast Guard, we are on fire, we're on fire. So you try it, it's a mystery, and we're looking at it, trying to figure out what happened. And it was so exciting, I couldn't sleep 2 days before I knew we were going. So you think that all the crew was out there getting ready to fight this fire, and then it really blew up. And that's why nobody was ever found. And they only found a few body parts of the 3. The rest of them, I have to speculate they got blew right off of the deck or incinerated right when it happened, because it was just, the damage doesn't even come close to being, I can tell you how bad it was. You can see the fire hose is still out there, and it's draped over the rail. We scooted around the back real quick, and it had a swimming pool. That's a swimming pool right there. So, and this is Tom going down the starboard side. Anybody who says you can't go inside of the bridge and scooter in a ship, that's me. One of the windows was busted out, so we scootered wiggled through the window and scootered around in there, and we're filming in there. Now you're gonna see some more stuff here from a second dive that I just went ahead and stuck in here. This is where I'm inside trying to make it to the control room, and I'll tell you why later. This is, one of my second dives. And this is some more where I entered on a second dive on a different trip. And there's reasons I'm showing you this, and I'm going to show you your videos if they come up. But that's the cruise lounge now. It was totally trashed, the cruise line, but it did, there's a drum set right there in the cruise lounge. So, we didn't take anything. Peter Hess told us we couldn't take anything because the owner still owned it. And that's the bridge window there that we went in, and you can see that's what the oil looked like all around it. So I'm going to play this little clip here. We got back, and I'll tell a little story here before I play the clip. And the video that Tom and I took, we didn't do a second dive. I'm going to tell you some things that happened. We were so cold that when we were coming back, because Tom and I actually did a 30-minute bottom time, which meant we had an hour and 20 minutes or 30 minutes of just decompressing from that depth. I cannot tell you how cold that was, because we were so excited during the dive, we ignored the 39-degree water, and you're moving and you're doing, but when you come back and you have to start decompressing at around 160 feet or 70 feet and working your way back up every 10 feet, and you're just hanging there, the reality of what you've done sinks in real quick. We had one guy had a Greg Crefter's dry suit flooded. When I finally came back, Tom and I did the longest dives because we did the whole wreck filming it. When I came back, my hands, I could not close my hands. It took 3 of us. God help my dive buddy Tom Sawicki, for you people who know him, gets seasick. He was so seasick, the mate dressed him to get in the water and put on an O2 bottle that didn't have a reg on it. So I had already hung an extra O2 bottle, so we were under the Big Mac, had to scooter over to the other one. I was trying to tell him, but I couldn't signal because my hands were froze. To remind him that I had a bottle over there, and he was going, "Oh, I don't have a reg. You know, and he wanted to change the reg, so another diver came by after I tried to get him to go over there, and they switched his reg out from his 50-50 to his O2 so he could decompress properly. But when we got back, I was like, I had my 72 hanging over there full of O2, and that's what I was trying to tell you. Let's get you on that. When we got to the boat, I did not have the strength, either one of us, to pass the scooter up. They had to lean over and get the scooters with the camera and pull them up. I tried to climb the ladder. I could not climb the ladder. My hands would not close on the pegs to climb the ladder. They were so cold. I got up on the boat. Here I am. I'm the captain. Of course, Mark Fowler was being the captain while we were in the water. He didn't want to dive. He took one look at that. I made him bring his tanks, and he's like, "Oh, I'm not diving." I said, "Okay, you know." So we decided not to do the second dive. I did a head count, and it's my job to make sure everybody was back, and I was missing Greg Keffler. And I searched the boat, and I couldn't find him. And I was like, "Hey, you said Greg's back. Where's he at?" At the time, I didn't know he had a flooded dry suit. They said when he got on the boat, he was on his knees, and he was shaking so bad that he was like this, and they had to drag him and get his gears off of him from a flooded dry suit. When I found him, I went up on the bridge, and I was looking around, and I was like, "He's not on the boat." And I hear this Darth Vader. I'm like, "What is that?" And there's a pile of clothes there because everybody bought sleeping bags and stuff. It was an open boat, you know, so we took turns sleeping on the way there. It was a 5-hour run in a boat that went 22 knots to get there. And he had everybody's stuff piled up on him with a bottle of O2, breathing under. He was scared. He was scared he was going to get bent from being so cold. And I found him. So there you are, man. So I got everything together, and we start heading back, you know, and we get back, and things never go well. Anybody who says dive trips go perfect, they're lying. Or either don't have a lot of experience. Because 69 miles from the inlet, the boat broke down. Both engines. And I was like, so I'm down in the engine room checking things out. Greg Keffler, who finally came around after, you know, a little while. And there's nothing like a boat breaking down to make you wake up and go. And so he was up, and he's a mechanic, and he was helping me. And he slid up under the console while I was in the engine room. And when they built the boat, these were the new prototype electronic diesel engines, first boat with them. And whoever wired it up wired both engines to the single power to the switch. And then the nut had unscrewed, fell off, and the wire had come undone. So without the brains of the engine having power, these new diesels don't run. And the only reason he found it is when he crawled under the console to look up to see what he could find there, something was jabbing in his back, and he sat up, and it was the nut. And he was like, "Where's this nut from?" And he solved the problem. We got the boat running. We came back in. Everybody was just ecstatic. Like I always do, I made everybody get together and do a group shot to document it. And of course, there was an incident that I get mad very easily. Some of y'all have seen my anger, but everybody was sworn to secrecy, and I get co-copied an email before we're supposed to go, and one of the guys on the trip sent a reporter an email for the Virginian pilot saying, "Hey, we're getting ready to go dive this. You may want to document this story." And I was furious, but everything was already set up. So I let him go. And so I cannot begin to tell y'all how mad I was. Because I keep my secrets until I'm done with them. And that's my option for putting these things together. Eventually you'll get credit for being there, and just like with this and everything, but I kind of like it to be on my terms. I got reasons I do things, just like I didn't want, I hired Peter Hess and find out in case we saw a body. I'm looking at the big picture, where most other people don't look at it like that. And so...
What did the owner say about the body?
They said leave it, document it, which I was great with. That's what I wanted to hear. You know, but look at if I didn't do this, and we saw a body, and we came back, half of America would say, "Why didn't you bring that up?" And the other half would say, "It's a grave site. Why were you even there?" So I wanted to put that in somebody else's ballpark, not my decision. I just want to dive, like most of us. And so we get back, and Tom and I look at the video, and the video is just freaking awesome of what we've documented. So I call Peter Hess. I said, "Peter, we just got back." He goes, "You went?" I said, "Yeah, we weren't the first ones. Big Mac was there." He goes, "Big Mac was there? They were supposed to let me know when they were going. I was going to go." So he was mad at them, and because he was supposed to be on their boat. And I was like, "No, but the video we have is awesome. Nobody has it. They were only diving the bridge." I said, "Check with the owners and see if they would like to buy this. We'll sell the video to them." So he calls the owners, and he tries to sell them the video for $15,000. And of course, he's going to get a third of it. That just, you know, I'm already paying him a base price, and so he's going to get a third of that. Well, they said, "No, we've got plenty of video. We don't want it." And I'm like, "Okay." So he calls me back and says they're not interested. He says, "But how good is this?" I said, "It's pretty good." And he goes, "Look, the news people are dying to have some information of this." He said, "If you can get a story in the paper and maybe a clip on the news, just show them what you have, might change their mind." So now the bad thing I was mad about became a good thing. So I emailed the reporter and told him what I had. My phone rang within 30 seconds of sending the email. And he was like, he goes, "Yes, I'm very interested in writing a story. Do you have pictures?" I said, "Yes, we have video. We can do screen grabs of it." And he's like, "When can I see it?" And I said, "When would you like this?" He said, "Right now." I said, "Okay, you have to come to me." And he's like, so he comes to the house, and these people are very slick. He turned on a recorder without us trying to see and slid it under the paper at my house with me and Tom there, so he could document what we were saying. There was many things going on JT didn't know, and I'll tell you later. But anyway, I'm going to show you the clip of the news that started it, and then I'm going to ramble on some more.
Only on 13 News, along with our partners at The Pilot, 13 News has obtained some exclusive video of the bow mariner in its final resting place at the bottom of the ocean. 13 News reporter Eric Turner talked to the divers who took the images.
He wrote the story, but I didn't know they were partners with News 13. Within 30 minutes of the meeting with him, the news called us and wanted on their news that night.
Despite all that we've heard about the disaster, is the damage done to the ship. 200 feet below the ocean's surface, this twisted metal is visual proof of the devastating explosion on board the Bow Mariner. The footage belongs to dive captain J.T. Barker and Tom Sawicki, who dove the wreck last weekend.
When we all came back, we couldn't believe what we saw. It's just total destruction from the house to the bow.
21 people died here, only 6 were rescued. And based on what the Coast Guard has reported about the disaster, Barker and his divers had a good idea what they'd find. But they didn't expect to see this, a fire hose, pulled, but never connected.
Where they were probably getting ready to attempt to fight the fire, and if there was a second explosion, it blew them away right off, because it's not hooked up.
Everyone who went on this trip was an expert diver. Captain Barker is quick to point out that going down to depths of 200 feet and greater is dangerous. It's perhaps even life-threatening if you don't know what you're doing. Coming up at 6, we'll have an update on the Coast Guard investigation into the Bow Mariner disaster. David?
All right, Eric, thanks so much for that.
Well, this newscast, every channel after that called me and had Tom and I, and they come out there and did an interview with us. We only gave them a small clip because they didn't want to put too much on there because we wanted to sell the video. And of course, 2 days later, this is the story that came out, and I have it hanging up there, so if anybody wants to read them. And like I always do, and I just did it recently when y'all heard me talk about when I went and got the first video of the U-576, even though it was crappy video, we're still the first to get it at 700 feet, which is, I figured out a way to do it. And everybody that was involved is now in Gary's book, which they're out here now. So, and that was one of the things when Gary wanted to write the story about it, I told him, I said, you got to include, just like I told the guy, I said, if you're going to put it in the paper, you have to put that picture right there so that everybody gets credit for going. So it was, you know, big time news. We were on the news channel for 3 straight nights because nobody got killed. There was no murders. So for 3 straight nights they ran our clip because they didn't have anything else. That's the way I felt about it anyway. So immediately after that, Peter Hess calls, says the owners would like a meeting. So Tom and I, we go into Norfolk at one of the big Norfolk. You know, he's still in college, and I still worked at the shipyard, and you know, there's nothing fabulous about us. I'm pretty savvy about ships because I work on them. And so we go in there, and we're talking about the price of the video, and I didn't know he had offered to sell them for $15,000, and they said, what would you like for the video? I said, $5,000 would be good. And they were like, well, your lawyer tried to sell it to us for $15,000. And I was like, okay, you know. So then they take us in a room, and there's like 15 lawyers in the room, and they're all sitting at this table, and Tom and I, and they whip out this drawing of the ship, and they start drilling us, asking us questions. And I couldn't answer. I was caught off guard with the questions, and the questions were, did I find it odd that there were no bodies found? Did I find it odd that the Coast Guard didn't find a single life preserver on the surface after it sank? Wasn't it odd that none of the rafts came up? And then they agreed to buy the video. He said, well, we'd like to see your video. And I said, well, are you going to buy it? Well, you're not going to show it to us till we buy it? I said, no. So they stroked out a check for $5,000, and we played the 2 videos. And they asked us, before we played it, they said, what do you think we have? You know we hired an ROV. I said, was it a manned ROV or umbilical cord ROV? They said an umbilical cord. I said, what you got right now is some little guy in a room trying to decipher what he's videoed. Because what I saw with the masts that were still up, that the umbilical cord was sure to get hung in him, and then he'd have to backtrack and unwrap it and try to start over and figure out where he had stopped filming to get a complete straight line of how it blew up. And so they agreed to that, and they watched the video and they go, yeah, that's pretty good. And they were like, okay, what do you think happened? And I said, I don't know, it blew up. And he's like, what do you think of the possibility of a terrorist attack? And I'd never thought of that. And then it was clicking the questions. No bodies, no life preservers, no raft, you got 6 survivors who's hired a lawyer that's not talking. And so you're like, he's like, are you capable to go inside of it? I said, yeah, I'm capable of going inside that wreck. And he goes, there's only one spot that everybody could be locked up at. And I said, okay. So he said, I said, where's it at? He said, right there. Can you get there? I said, what's the fastest way to get there? I said, doing wreck penetrations is nothing like cave diving. Things are tough. And he said, there's a skylight right there. Right behind the superstructure. This is the deck. He said, if you open that up, you can drop straight down and go to where the cage is. It's where they have a locked cage. And I said, he said, we would like to hire you to go look. I said, I'm sorry, but you cannot hire me. And he's like, why not? I said, because there's commercial diving laws that don't apply to me. And if you're paying us to do this dive and somebody gets hurt, it becomes a crazy, suicidal, ruin your life lawsuit. And he's like, I said, what I will do, we will go dive it. And, if we see anything, we'll sell you the video. And he's like, okay. And I said, I'd like to get a copy of that blueprint too. There, it might, And of course, immediately, one of the other lawyers jumped up and said, we can't give you that because you've already told us we can't hire you. Now you're giving you something that you can sue us over for encouraging you to go somewhere you might get in trouble. And I said, no, I don't want the drawing for that. And he goes, no. I said, no, you've already bought the other video. What I will do is draw you a timeline from where we're at in the video, so as you're watching the video, you can see where we're at. I'll write on the drawing the timeline on the videos, so it's documented when you watch it, so you can look at the drawings and see what you're looking at. And the guy said, no, you're not. You're going to copy that. And the other lawyer said, shut up. He's doing us a favor. And I said, yeah, I wouldn't copy that. So they gave me the drawing. Immediately when we left there, we went to Office Max, made 5 copies. So,
Well, everybody had to study it, right?
yeah, well, the only 2 guys who knew anything about this was Tom and I. I've been holding these secrets for a long time. It's been over 15 years now. I figure, I can tell you I was getting calls from families in Greece wanting copies of the video. I couldn't sell it to them. I already sold them the video. It was the phone calls you get from, and you're like, who raised these people? The things you get accused of and whatever, you kind of have to block yourself from it. There's some nuts out there. But we went back. And of course, I organized. Now that I'd already dove it once, I was able to expand who I could allow to go. Because I found out that the superstructures, as you saw in the picture, came all the way up to 160 feet. Actually, 150 feet if you were on the top. So I had other divers that dove with me that were loyal to me, that were not Trimex, but they were capable of doing that depth, who really wanted to go. And now I felt good enough. The Lindsay got out of dry dock, from getting the bottom paint and everything. And I put together another trip, and we went there, and they were limited to the bridge area because of depth, while the rest of us that could go down went. And of course, nobody knew what Tom and I was doing. As I told you before, I just don't play all my cards out there. This is a clip here of we're checking out. Oh, where'd it go? Come on, why ain't it playing? This is me dropping down on the scooter, and in between the stack and the back of the house, going to check that hatch. They believed that it had already been opened by the crew. Of course, when I got down there and you see me check it, it's tight. I couldn't get in there. There it is right there. You'll see me down. This is Tom filming me. And I couldn't get in there. I tried to go in another door there and go down another deck. And there was so much, it was cheaply built, the superstructure. And all the partition walls were not steel, and they had fallen and closed like this. And I couldn't get down to get to the engine room through the passageways. I could have forced it, but I found every time I've already been trapped in wrecks twice, and you know, when that happens, the 3 strikes you're out. And I got lucky twice, and you've heard me talk about this. And the next thing they wanted to know was in the control room for the ballast in the tanks and all the liquids in the tank, they wanted to see where all the gauges were, so they could see what the status of the crew had done, what they were doing, because nobody was talking. They didn't have anybody that would cause an explosion. So I scooted around it and found the door that I needed to get to based on the drawing. And Tom has no ship sense. He's a great cave diver, but he has no ship sense. So this is why he's following me. I had my crowbar in case the door shut on me or something. You see it there? So I could reach back and pry out. I was so scared about it getting locked in there that I would take my stage off and block it in front of the door so the door couldn't swing and trap me in there. And he waited outside because, you know, worst thing of having somebody in trouble on the inside is 2 guys in trouble on the inside. So he was my backup if I didn't come out to come look for me and see what happened. So I scooter in there, and I'm trying to get into the control room, and you'll see me go in there. And I passed the purser's office, but I didn't bother, wasn't interested in that. I knew there was a safe in there. But I'm tasked to do what I had a task, and you kind of stick to it. And I went around the corner, and I found the control room, and I tried to get in the control room, and the ceiling had fell down. You'll see me, I make a left there to go down another hallway, and then I had to make another right to get into the control room, and the ceiling had fallen down, and the wires were in there, and it just were hanging all down like grapevines or something you'd see, and it was just freaking me out too much, and I wouldn't go in there. I kind of got freaked out. And and you gotta, I think I'm about at a depth of 190 feet right there. And so it's very humbling what you think your skills are.
What time of year
The second trip was in May. We went back in May.
2004?
Yes, 2004. And of course, there was crap floating all around in there, and he's waiting out, and I figured I couldn't get in the control room. The other thing I was looking for, we went up and tried to find the captain's log. They asked if we could find the captain's log to see if he had documented if something had happened, like the ship was being taken over. And so he wrote it down in the log, So we couldn't get in there. We came back. We sold him the video, told him what I found. I was supposed to go back. In the meantime, in June, they had a second ship blow up of their 65 ships. Now they have 2 ships that blowed up. Yes. And so you're watching that. They'd already bought, I didn't have any more communication with them, but that came out in the news that the Coast Guard was still investigating. And so I went on I had another monster dive planned on July 4th to the Ostfriesland, which is 400 feet deep. And we went out there to dive it, Tom and I and Greg Keffler. And yeah, you kind of see what happened there. I got the snot bent out of me. So that put an end to my season for a little while. When I finally got out of the chamber, they told me to never dive again. I lasted 25 days before I made my first dive. But I wasn't ready to go back to do 260 feet. I'm the guy that makes things happen. So it didn't, didn't happen. There's me getting lifted off. So the Bow Mariner kind of died. And after that, it come to find out from the second one, explosion, that it was a procedure that the crew was using to clean the tanks. That caused a fire, and then vapors explode way more than anything else. And since the 3 tanks were empty and it had ethanol fumes in it, it just ignited and blew up. So there was no terrorist. Eventually the crew talked after they were granted immunity. And the reason they didn't talk is because they were Filipinos, and the crew were Greek, and the Greeks treated them terrible, is what they said. As most Greeks are hot-tempered, and they didn't trust the Greeks with, thought they would be blamed for it. So they hired lawyers and just were quiet. And of course, all this comes out later. And I've only been back to it one time. I ran a charter in my own boat, but to run 105 miles, it's a non-winner as far as a business goes. So I had nothing else to prove. It's really out of my distance range for running a charter there. If somebody really wants to pay what it costs to go there, yeah, I'll go there. But no diver wants to pay what that really cost. This is a side scan sonar that they did afterwards, and you can see that the ship is sitting on its keel. Both sides are completely blowed out of every tank, that right there that you see. The decks are all peeled up. It's just unbelievable. It's a dive I'll always remember and feel funny about how I got caught thinking it was terrorists. You think about it, it was only 2 years and 5 months after 9/11. So that's on everybody's mind when something happens. Was it a terrorist attack? And so you could see why they're thinking, based on the questions they were asking, why they would think that, and then the people not talking and hire lawyers. So, that's the date we dove it. That's the people who dove it. You got to recognize everybody here. Of course, it's Jeff Hewlett, Mark Fowler, Bill Ripley. That's Tom Sawicki there. That's Jackie Smith, Greg Cutler, Susan Johnson, and Charlie Johnson. And it's kind of like a ghost picture here for me and some of them. Later that year, Susan died in the Great Lakes diving, and Jackie Smith died the following New Year's Day testing a rebreather in a quarry. So, you look at that picture, but you're talking about everybody there is the highest certified diver you can get when you go to Trimix on rebreathers, and huge amount of experience. I would say 5 of us in that photo have dove the Ost Freeland, so all capable of 400 feet. So it's the way that you can pass away anywhere. It's not, you don't have to dive real deep to dive. You just got to make a mistake and break the rules on a shallow dive and it gets you. But really, it was a dive I'll never forget. I hope you enjoyed me talking about it. You're the first to hear about the terrorist thing. I like telling stories, people. So, but if anybody's got any questions. Yeah.
So when they sent you down, they thought the recrew had been like locked in a room?
Yes. In other words,
Did you need a key or something to get in? Or how did
no,
they expect you to
they just wanted to know. After that, I'm not a Dick Tracy. I'm not gonna bring all these bodies up if they're locked in there.
But I guess how would you know if you just couldn't open the door?
Because it's a cage.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay.
When you're in the engine room,
Okay.
they have cages to lock up tools. In the machine shop, they're not a closed shop. It's just a cage, and you can look in there.
Okay.
And that was the only place that they could, in their mind, that the whole crew could have been shuttled to and locked up while explosives were set on the boat and blew up. With the hope that they would get out of it by hiring lawyers and not talking, that's me summarizing, between our conversation. They were very mad in the first 10 minutes of us talking to them, especially when they saw the video and somebody had taken that boat sign and they knew nobody was supposed to be taking it. We didn't take it, but we weren't the only ones there. And that was the first, you're already stripping the wreck. No, sir, we did not. I instructed everybody on the boat and they were not allowed to take anything. Well, who took that sign? Because they already had the ROV that showed it there when they did it. So they were already mad at us.
There was an explosion.
Yeah, but they already had documented that it was there after it sank. Somebody took it off. But has anybody else got any questions?
So law enforcement didn't ask for your video for their investigation?
Law enforcement had nothing to do with it. The Coast Guard was doing their investigation. I'll drop this. Michelle was supposed to check with me, but they took her captain 2 days after it happened, locked him in a room, and wouldn't let anybody near him while they interrogated him because she was supposed to check because he would never talk about it. I think that the reason they interrogated him so hard, because he was the first boat on the scene, or one of the first boats, that he might have seen something that told him it was terrorists and not, because they found nothing, no life preservers, no rafts, no bodies, just a couple body parts. And another thing that came out, and this happened in 2004, it was in 2006 that all the ships were now required to have the Gumby suit in 2006. So they did not have the cold water Gumby suits like you see in the Deadliest Catch, you see them putting on in the Deadliest Catch. So if they didn't blow up, they got in the water and they were dead within 15 minutes from hypothermia in that 39-degree water. And they probably sank if they weren't burned up from the fire that was going on around it from the oil on fire. But it's one of the many things I've done that I'll remember the rest of my life.
And sometimes insurance won't cover if it's terrorism.
I don't know. That's out of my range.
That's why they might really wanted to know.
Yeah.
themselves.
Well, it was the owners that wanted to know it.
But they probably.
But I can tell you, I think I'm just a normal guy, and to go in a room that's got like a 12-foot table with 15 lawyers sitting at it, and you're sitting there at the other end, and they're asking you these questions that you weren't prepared for. It never crossed my mind about terrorism. Somebody else had a question?
Does the company that designed the self-deploying safety raft reevaluate their design?
I have no idea. I mean, obviously I showed you the one that was there. It didn't self-deploy. One thing that has bothered me, I've never found a bell on a wreck, and I scooted right by one. And when we went up to the bow, it was hanging on that post right there, and
I hope you got a good picture of it.
I gave my word that I wouldn't, but a bell. You know, that's a tough one. You know, that's kind of like, don't eat that last cookie. But somebody else got it, and they when we went to the bell party a few years ago, that was Mike Boring's house. They had a bell party, and there was 33 bells there, or something, and the Bow Mariner bell was there, and yeah, so. So anyway, any more questions? Well, I hope y'all guys enjoyed it.